this is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
What's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 349 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and as you can see from the sign here, I'm on location. I'm actually in Florida. I'm out of Indiana, as a lot of you know, but I am in Florida this week to do some work with the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, and I've got an episode that I'm recording here really quick. I was with my mom and my siblings last night. My mom and I watched ABC's Emergency Call, and we ended up doing a recap episode after that. My good friend Leah and I were on there, and my mom was on there as well. It was funny because she's sitting there, and we start getting into like this laughing fit, and it was very easy to break my mom. What I mean by break her is into laughter, and then I can't get her out of it. So it was hilarious. There were definitely some serious calls in the show that we talked about seriously, but some of the calls that were kind of funny, we were going through those, and maybe I'll talk with my guest about a couple of those, but it was very fun last night. So thank you, Leah, as well as my mom, for being on the recap and just going through it, and those who are on there as well. It was an excellent episode. Very happy and impressed with the way they're doing this show. Like, they're actually putting out there what it's like in dispatch. So well done, creators of the show there on ABC. You've done very well. So I have a lot of stuff that's been going on. I want to thank patrons as well for everything, as always, and all of you for watching, sharing, and supporting. And I just recently put out for patrons a new Singing Badly in My Car episode. That's a patron exclusive. I did share that with the public as well, as just a little taste of what some of those episodes are. This most recent one was the song Dynamite by BTS, which is a lot of fun to do. However, the song has been stuck in my head all week since I learned it for that video to do, and I cannot get it out of my head. I thought I was hallucinating sitting on the couch the other day while doing work, because I heard the song come on, and then I look up to notice that it was a commercial with Samsung. So I can't escape it, but it's there. So make sure to check that out on Patreon. Again, Singing Badly in My Car. This is an exclusive videos that I do. I'm trying to do one of those every other week. But today I have got a guest out of Melbourne, Australia, and this is going to be fun. We were sending emails back and forth a little bit, and we're talking, and now she's going to be a guest in the show. And this is Molly, and she is an ambulance call taker with ESTA, again, out of Melbourne, Australia. Hey.
Hello. Hey.
How is it
Hello
going?
From the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And so we were talking earlier, and it is now 10 after midnight over there.
It is. Yeah. I'm right in the middle of my shift.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And and we're going to talk here now. We were talking earlier, and I had asked you how long you've been doing this, and you said 10 months now, right?
Yeah. I'm a baby. I have only 10 months. I started in January.
Oh man. So, okay, there's a lot that we have to talk about here in the time that we have, but
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just start at the beginning. So how did you start out? Like, what made you want to go into, into this entire role, this industry of public safety?
Well, I always wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid. I always wanted to be in the medical field. Finished high school. I got a Bachelor of Science, wanted to get into medicine, didn't get in. I worked at the airport for 5 years because I only lived 10 minutes away. So it was convenient and easy. And I loved the busyness of the airport. It's a fun place to work. But the thing that I didn't like about it was the business and the money side of things. I didn't like that I had to charge people excess for baggage and, different things like that. Like we would weigh people's bags and make them pay crazy amounts of money for 1 or 2 kilos. I didn't like that. I just wanted to be there to help those people get on their flight, and that's it. And I think one of the good things about, well, we call it emergency services rather than public safety in Australia, is that in my role as an ambulance call taker, it's one of the only jobs where you don't pay anything. So if you're fallen over in the street and you call 000, it's a free number. You don't have to pay. And I kind of like the fact that I would be in a role where I purely help people. I'm not trying to make any money for anybody. Like there's no ulterior motive behind anything. And yeah, I actually I'd been watching the UK's 999 What's Your Emergency? And that's kind of where it led me from there. I looked on their website, applied. I think there was only maybe a month left before the deadline of when I applied, which was last year. And I remember being so stressed because you had to write 200 words and that was all you could write. So you obviously had to make yourself stand out. And they do say on their website they get about 2,000 applications a year. Obviously not that many people actually work here. So it really stressed me out thinking, how am I going to make myself stand out with 200 words? So I think I wrote it about 10 times. And yeah, here I am. Luckily, it did stand out, I guess.
Yeah, well done. So, okay, so you mentioned this 200 words. So what are they asking then? You just
why do you want to do the role?
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Is it why? Why do you want to do this?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh man, yeah. So you definitely have to put yourself out there and maybe even be kind of creative as well. Think outside the box and all. And they weigh all those options. So that's step one. Is that step one then, really?
Step one of, I think, 4 steps. Yeah. Yeah, step one. And then it was a video interview after that. One of those pre-recorded ones where you get 30 seconds and then you have to say it and then it goes on to the next question. And then after that was a test where they give you numbers and you have to type them back and it gets faster and faster and you have to look at patterns and shapes and things. Yeah. I think after that we had an assessment day where we came in and they got us to do some map reading and listening and I guess to check different things. We had to type, see how fast you could type and things like that. And then we had to do a test after that, which was looking at scenarios and how you react to them. So it went for quite a long time and they would ask you what you would do kind of in a certain situation, but it would ask it slightly differently each time. So that's what I was saying earlier. It's kind of like a personality test.
Yeah.
And from that point, they would ask you, you might be more suited to police than ambulance. Like, would you like to, do one or the other? Because, we're lucky that we have all 3 services.
Dang. Okay, that is very interesting. One, especially because that is way more than what I did at the
and also
last.
We had another panel interview after that. So it was another interview after that went for about 45 minutes or so, and then you got the job.
Jeez. Okay, hold on. Yeah. We'll get to the panel part here in a moment because this part interests me because I had to do a panel interview once as well, and there were a lot of people there. But okay, so when I started through the process for the last center that I was at, where I actually finished off my dispatching career, I went in, I had my interview. One of the things that really helped me was when I was in there with the county administrator as well as the deputy director. They had asked me if I had any questions for them. And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out this paper pad just full of questions. And I remember them laughing and saying, "Oh, this is going to be good. We haven't had anyone who actually wanted to ask us questions. You've done your research." Then I said, "Well, yeah, I want the job for one, and two, like I'm very interested. Of course, yeah, I did my research." But then after that, it was a written test and then the background, and that was it. So
We also had to do background as well. I had to get my fingerprints taken. I remember doing that as well, because it's not something that you really have to do very often here.
right.
The only time I'd ever had my fingerprints taken was flying into the US.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I had to go and get my fingerprints taken, and they did a background check as well. But I think the online test we did is probably similar to what you would have done as a written test.
Yeah. So in the test there was like 50 questions, I think, 50 or 60 questions, and we had a time limit. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was just you gotta think on your feet and think on your feet. And there was one question that I'll never forget that I was on the fence about, and after I answered it and handed it in, I knew I had it wrong. Like I knew that
No.
I knew that I should have gone with my gut instead of second guessing. And I second guessed it, and I went with the other answer, and they're like, "Yeah, you were right the first time." And I thought, "Oh
That's
man!"
the worst.
So yeah, so that would still to this day it haunts me.
Yep.
But at a different place that I had gone to, they had a different setup where it was kind of like yours, where there was way more to it. There was a typing test; you could only get 3 mistakes, and after
Yep.
that was it. You were done. You were done with it, and you couldn't go any further. And
Yep.
but before that typing test, they had us listen to radio traffic, and
Mhm.
you had to listen to the traffic between the dispatcher and the officer who was out on the road, and you had to write down exactly what you thought was going on. And the traffic was kind of broken up as it was already, but it was over like an intercom system where even that made it sound even worse. So
Yeah.
that's what they used to whittle down from 30 to like 10 people.
Yep.
Um, but then there was the panel interview, and that's the part
Yep.
that I wanted to talk to you about now,
Yep.
because there was 6 people on one side and then just me.
Yep.
And one person would fire off a question, and then each one of them would fill in and go behind them and ask more and more. And you're trying to multitask and ask questions and think on your feet and do all of this. So how was it for you? Was it that intense?
I didn't have that many people. 6 is a lot of people.
Yeah.
We only had, I think it was maybe 2 or 3, but yeah, they had my whole file on their
Mhm.
desk. I think that was intimidating. So I was
Oh,
like, what are you looking at? Like,
yeah.
what is in there that you're looking at and thinking to ask me questions? And I knew it was going to go for an hour, and I felt like an hour was a very long time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, I think once I got into it, it wasn't that bad. It was more the anticipation and waiting for them to come and collect me was worse. Like
Oh,
sitting in the reception, like, oh, when am I going to go?
right.
That
Yeah.
was worse than actually being in it.
It's like being on a roller coaster and you're waiting,
Hmm.
you're anticipating, you hear the tick, 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 tick,
Yeah.
and then you go down.
Especially because you really want to get the job. So you're
Yeah.
just trying to be like, what? I have to say the best possible things. But yeah.
Yeah.
And I also knew I needed to ask a question, because I remember being taught that in high school when we did
Mhm.
like practice for careers. Always have a question. They like if you ask a question. So I
Yes.
was trying to like have a question bank in my head.
Oh man, that's funny. It makes me a little on edge thinking about that panel having to do that.
Yep.
Because yeah, there's a lot of people there and they're asking all these questions, and also you don't think about it right away until you're into the mix and in training, and even beyond that you end up thinking back. There was a reason that they were firing off all these questions, because they want to make sure that you can handle the pressure, because
Yeah.
in those situations you've got to think on your
Yep.
feet, and you have to make those decisions, and yeah, you've got to think that way. um yeah, I had the it was a county administrator, 2 captains, and then who were the other 3? There were supervisors from dispatch. They were all like top people, and I remember
Mhm.
sitting there because the guy who had come out, I had been waiting there just like you. um I can see myself now sitting in that lobby waiting, and the guy comes out and he looked spent, like he looked wore out. And I said, did you just come from the interviews that they're doing for dispatch? And he goes, yeah, good luck. He goes, I've been
Oh
in there
no.
for like 3 hours. And I said, are you serious, man? 3 hours? And I don't remember how long mine was. If it was 3 hours, I don't even remember it,
Yeah.
because when it was done, I remember sitting down, going through questions, and then the next thing I know, I'm sitting in my car thinking, what the heck just happened?
What happened? Yeah, I feel that. I absolutely feel that. And I remember thinking, they were so nice to me, but then they're probably really nice to everyone. So you can't tell what they thought of you.
Yeah. Oh, so how long after the interview and the entire process that you went through did you find out that you ended up getting the position?
It was actually pretty good, to be honest. Like, I think
Mhm.
from the very first time I applied, it was maybe a week or two after that was the next stage. And then it was about a week between each stage.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't, yeah, that definitely wasn't that bad.
It wasn't a really long time, no.
When I very first started dispatching, which was here in Florida, in Central Florida, um, it took a couple months from the
Ooh,
time that I had my one interview with them to when I got hired. And I thought that I completely screwed up the interview. And because I didn't hear from them. And then just one day out of the blue, the chief of police shows up and asks me if I still want the job. And I said, well, of course I do. But
sure.
I thought that I messed up because I hadn't heard from you. And he goes, no,
Yeah.
we just have a lengthy process that we have to go through. And I said, oh, okay. And, he asked me if I still wanted the job. I said, yes. And, me thinking that I'll be going in like next week or something, or at least a couple days from the time that he asked if I still wanted the job. No, my first shift was that night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was midnight shift that night. He goes, "You're gonna come in for midnight shift," and I said,
Oh, okay.
"Oh, you
Well,
still want the job, right?" And I said, "Yeah."
yeah, I didn't start straight away. I was really lucky that when I was meant to start, I was actually presenting at a conference
Mhm.
overseas for my PhD. So I told them during the interview, like, I really hope, this isn't going to hinder me getting the position. But thankfully, they had another group starting. So I started in the next group, which was a
Oh,
few months later. But my
perfect.
previous job at the airport, it was a 6-month wait to find out that job. So I was so excited that this was so quick, being week to week.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that definitely has to help with any, I don't know, worry, anxiety, anything like that of, did I get this? What's going? How's it working out? That's awesome
Yeah.
that they kept in touch with you throughout every
Yeah.
single stage. And because sometimes with places, you go through it and you think, I did really well, and then you don't hear back, and
And you
then
think,
you
obviously, I didn't get it.
yeah, and then you never hear back. Yeah, because they just
Yeah.
completely moved on. You're like, okay, well, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. Be nice to say, sorry, you've been rejected.
Right. Yeah, yeah, at least that.
Yep.
So then you get through it all
Hmm.
and you get this position.
Yep.
You're 10 months in. Are you technically still in training, or how long was the
No.
training?
So initial training went for 10 weeks,
Mhm.
which was really, really hard, harder than I expected it to be,
Yeah.
considering that, yeah, I'm a PhD student. So I've done a lot of uni. And I think this was harder than going through uni because it was so intensive.
Mhm.
And we spent 6 weeks just in the classroom. So that was all learning, map stuff and all of the procedures. And then we spent another 4 weeks being mentored one-on-one, taking live calls, but in a separate area to the rest of the call takers.
Mhm.
And we worked different hours as well. And then after that, we were out on the floor taking calls by ourselves, but then we were still in training for another 8 weeks or so. And then we didn't get our final sign off until the 6-month mark, where they listened to your calls for like a day or so and then went over a couple of things with you. And then you were finally signed off.
So let's go back a little bit. So you get in there.
Mm.
What is that like for you? Like, did you do any sit-alongs or anything like that? Did they bring you in and say, this is, where, you'll be working in this area. These are these computers, this and this, before they take you to the classroom? Or, I mean, just walking
No.
in, was it overwhelming at all? Just walking in for that first day and seeing everyone working, or did they take you to that classroom first before going out to the floor?
But we did a lot of like OH&S and those type of things that you have to do.
Mhm.
And then they showed us the operations floor, but we just walked around and went straight back to our classroom. So we didn't listen to anything. We didn't see anyone. We were told to keep quiet, obviously.
Mhm. Yeah.
They showed us the screens and yeah, then we went straight back to the classroom. And at the end of our first week, we had a practical assessment. And when we finished our assessment, then we got to go out and listen for an hour. We were so excited because obviously we'd not heard any calls yet by that point. Yeah. So then we got to sit with someone for about an hour, and then we did that, I think, once a week for the rest of the 6 weeks that we were in the classroom.
Man, was there any moment in those times where you got to sit out there that you heard something and you thought, what am I getting myself into?
No, but they got us to listen to some curly calls, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
That they had on the data bank. So we listened to some interesting, strange calls, and we also listened to some distressing calls, so we would know what techniques to use as well. And then when we went out on the floor, we all expected to have exciting stuff, but majority of the calls aren't like that. Majority of the calls are, elderly fallers and someone that's just generally unwell. They can't give you an actual priority symptom on or anything. So I think going out on the floor actually reinforced that normal life is not all that exciting, crazy stuff where people are dying right there and now. A lot of it is more about, I wouldn't like to say customer service because I feel like that sounds very businessy, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right.
A lot of it is just, like most of our calls are just generally helping someone that's unwell or has collapsed in a supermarket. A lot of it is not doing CPR and really bad car accidents and stuff. So I think it was good to actually go out and see what it actually is like.
Yeah, exactly. Because you could have a completely different perception going into it, especially because it's good in the training portion to listen to those calls. You need to listen to those calls because you got to know what you're getting into, right? Because you don't want to get into, no place ever wants to get into a position where they're training people so fast that they miss those pieces. Because then you'll have someone get that out there on the floor, and it'll be that first call that they take that is one of the ones that they have never really heard about. And then they either freeze up or they realize, this really isn't for me. And I say that speaking from experience, because there was a time where the old center that I was at, there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and especially to the point where we were very, very short staffed, and we were trying to train people as fast as possible. And I remember one person just kind of blazing through, and the person did very well. But the one of the first calls that this person ended up taking when they were on their own, it ended up being a pretty hard call. And they hadn't dealt with anything or heard anything like that up until that point. And that was their last shift. They worked for a couple more hours and they were done. That was it. So, it was definitely good that, they had that for you and everybody else in the same group as you to be able to listen to all of those. But yeah, you're right. A lot of the calls that come in, it isn't death and gore all the time. There are sometimes people are calling in because sometimes they just want to talk, or like you said, like a general illness. Yep.
And a lot of the time you've got, especially with the elderly, they just want to talk and talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
And you can't afford to talk and talk and talk and talk because you got to take more calls and you got to do that within a certain time frame. So it's being polite, but also getting them to stop and tell you exactly what you need in that time. And I know during my training, that was the number one thing I needed to work on. Like, I didn't fail any of the tests. I did really well in all of the written and stuff. And I did well with the customer service, but I wasn't that good with call control, as we call it, because I was too nice to people and I wasn't direct enough to get them to say, to get them to just listen to me, which I think was the hardest thing that I found. And that was the biggest hurdle to get over, to then be out on my own, was to meet that benchmark of having enough control of your caller. Because obviously it's possibly the worst day of their life. Someone is dying, or it's their child that's really unwell, and you have to be able to, yes, be empathetic, but at the same time, they need to tell you what's happening so you can actually help them.
Exactly. Yeah, that is definitely something that's hard to master right in the beginning, especially if you're not used to doing something like that. Like for me, up until the point that I started dispatching, all I had was retail experience, retail management experience. So technically I had some of those skills because I would have some angry customers who would come in, and I would have
Yep.
to navigate that, and
Yep.
use my words in a way where I could be assertive, but still, empathetic, and
Yeah.
reaching out and supporting them to I want them to come back. That's the that's the point
It's true.
of also being the manager of that store too. But
I
just to set that standard as well.
Yeah. Well, I got yelled a lot at the airport. So,
Oh,
so
well, there
I
you
was
go.
used,
So
I was used to the abusive people, so that doesn't bother me at all.
yeah.
Because people are very emotional at the airport and they get very angry at airport staff. So but I remember going home and telling my family, "Oh, I need to work on my call control. What if I'm not going to be able to do it and I won't pass?" And I'm the oldest of 4 children,
Mhm.
and at home I'm very bossy. So my family was very surprised that there was an issue that I was having at work. Like, what do you mean? You're bossy as at home. You're super controlling. Like, well, I don't know. It's different.
Right. Like, you aren't calling me with issues that are going on
Yeah,
medically or whichever. I'm trying to
yeah,
be nice.
exactly.
That's funny. I'm the oldest of 4 as well, and that's I know what you mean.
I'm used to telling them what's up.
Oh man, that is interesting. Yeah, there's so many different things that come into this, and for myself, working every discipline of emergency services, you've got people who are calling in on their worst day, or it is their worst day to them, where
Yeah,
they're calling in because their neighbor's dog is barking. They're working third shift and they can't sleep throughout the day. Okay, if you really want an officer out there, we'll send somebody out for a noise complaint.
yeah,
There's not a lot they can do, but we'll go ahead and get somebody out there. So there's those types of things too. Like I said, and like you said as well, it's not the worst day every single day, but for that person, it might be that worst day. I've got a slogan for a session that I do called Imagine Listening. And I have it in there as, your worst day is my everyday, but that's for, um, those hard, horrific calls. But, my friends and family would ask the same thing, is it blood and gore every single day? I'm like, no, people sometimes call me because they want to know when the parade is going to be and on 911. And you
yeah.
just deal with it.
I know what you mean. Yeah. And I think the other thing people don't like, my family still asks me sometimes, "Oh, do you have any interesting calls?" But I
Mhm.
think to be able to do this job, you have to be the kind of person that can let things go really easily. So when I finish my shift, something that might seem at the time, like, I'll turn around to my colleague and be like, "Oh," and have a chat about a certain call. But by
Yeah.
the time I'm home, I've forgotten about it. They all kind of blend into one, and work is work, and you're able to let those things go and not let them affect you. And I think if they did, you probably wouldn't be that good in doing this job. So
Yeah, and so for myself, yeah, I was one of those dispatchers and call takers that for a long time I just buried a lot of the calls. Now, for me, after years of doing that, eventually it caught up to me, and then it wasn't good,
yeah,
because it was making things bad. Like I didn't know how to really express that. So for me, it was therapeutic to be able to write about it. I started
yeah,
a blog and I started sharing a lot of the stuff, and people not only in public safety where I was working, but those in the public were reading it and they were understanding more. So that
yeah,
really helped me, especially what we're doing now. Sharing stories like this is therapeutic as well. And
yeah,
so that was a big thing, because I did throw it out and let it go and laughed about a lot of stuff that people who don't do this did not understand. They would say, "What is wrong with you?" And I would say, "That wasn't funny to you."
yeah. My family finds it really strange how I think, well, when I tell them, majority of the time when I do CPR, the person doesn't survive. So it just, it doesn't mean that much to me because I know majority of them won't. It's less than
Mhm.
10% of people will survive outside of hospital.
Right.
So I think the way that I think about death is probably quite different to the way people that don't work in emergency services or work in a hospital or healthcare would think about death.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I have a really good team and we always work with the same team. We work with them all of the time. So we'll just turn around to our colleague and have a chat, and we might have a bit of a complain or whinge or moan about something, and then jump back into it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that is actually very cool that you stay with your team all the time. At my center, I think it was every 3 months, or I think it was every 3 months, we would change shifts all the time.
Oh,
And so there was one time, there was, I think, 3 rounds of it where I was actually with the same team. And it was, you went in, and the officers out on the road, and those in EMS and fire as well, would say, we knew that everything was good to go when we heard your voices, because we know how your team works. Well, then we ended up splitting off, and none of us were on the team anymore. We were on different teams and stuff. And then it was just weird. Everybody that we worked with, everyone did a good job. It's just when we worked together as that specific team, it was like nothing could break us. And if something did chip, away, we had each other there, and we talked to each other. And this, it's that whole camaraderie and everything that goes on with it. So I like the fact that you stay with your team. Now
we do. I see them more than I see my family now.
Yeah.
Because we're locked in.
There's a second family there. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So this whole 10 months, you've been on midnight shift? You've been on the night shift?
So we work 2 day shifts, 2 night shifts, and then we have 4 days off.
Oh, okay.
So it rotates from week to week. So I can see my whole roster for the next however many years I work here if I stay on this same team. Yeah.
So then what do you like more? Do you like days or nights?
Days go faster, I feel like, because there's more calls, because people are obviously out and doing things. But then night shift, you get the more interesting characters. So
yes,
you got to use your brains a little bit more sometimes at nighttime, because there's less, like during the day, you've got all of the things that you would expect people to do during the day, plus all of like people going to the medical centers needing transfers to hospitals and stuff. But then at night, you get more of the mental health calls and a lot of people that you can't really tell what's wrong, and you having to, try and figure out what's happening. Plus also at night shift, there's less calls, so you get to talk to your colleagues more. So that's nice. So I think they both have their positives.
Yeah.
But I probably like night shift more, actually, I think.
I'm right there with you. I'm the same way. So I worked night shift the entire time, except for a stint where I had mornings when I had been promoted to supervisor. And for whatever reason, nobody wanted that morning shift, and I was the low person on the pole. So that's the one that I got automatically. And for me, though, I lived about 45 or so minutes away from the center that I worked at. So I would have to get up at 3 a.m. and leave by about 3:30, 3:45 to get to the center by 4:15.
I'm the same. I live almost an hour away sometimes because of traffic.
Oh.
So I feel you. I understand.
Yeah. So then you're waking up extra early, and then by the time you get there, I remember one time early on in that morning stint that I did, I had set my alarm, but for whatever reason, I turned off the phone. Like I put it in airplane mode so that no calls would come in, because I needed to sleep. And when I woke up, it was 4:30 in the morning.
That's
and I
worst nightmare.
Oh yes, I was freaking out. And I look at my phone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what time it is. And I turn my phone on, and message. And I call into dispatch, and my coworker picks up, and she goes, "Did you oversleep?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I'll be there as fast as I can." And all I hear is her laughing, busting up as she's hanging up the phone.
I'm sorry, I'm not dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man, but yeah,
I set 3 alarms for that reason.
Oh, really?
If I turn one off, I set them about 5 minutes apart. So if I turn one off, then I know the next one will go off.
Perfect. See, that's what I should have done.
I made that mistake once when I worked at the airport, because I used to start at 4 a.m. there as well. And I did that one time, and I did not do it again.
Oh, yeah. You learned your lesson.
Yeah.
Doing all three disciplines of emergency
Mm,
services, during the day, um, at least on my end, it seemed like all the calls that we had that would come in were like admin calls. And what I mean by admin calls is just basically, people calling in to talk to different officers, or,
mm,
calling about court cases, or just little things here and there. And but what it was, though, early in the morning when I would get there is when most of the medicals would happen. And it would
mm.
be, an elderly couple. One of them wakes up to their husband or wife, or whichever, that didn't wake up. They woke up to
Yeah.
them, there. And
Yeah.
so that would happen. And then it would go out through the rest of the day with not a lot going on. And then towards the end of the shift, people are getting out of work. And for whatever reason, they've held in being upset, and they want to call 911 after
Yeah.
that. And then you go into night shift. And like you were saying, a lot of the interesting stuff happens.
Interesting stuff happens at night. It really does.
Mhm. So you kind of got into this profession at an interesting time
Mm, did.
in the entire world.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
know it was going to be like that when I started, but yes.
Yeah, so you're getting into an interesting profession to begin with in general. And this is January. And
Mhm.
I think even around January, there was little blips here and there on the news about stuff that was going on. And then, you get to February, and it's starting to get more. And then
Yep.
basically now on lockdown and stuff. So then
Mhm.
you're well into training during this. Again, when I asked before, was there any time that you thought, what am I getting into? Now you add in COVID. Did that thought ever run past your mind too? Like, I got into this at a real interesting time.
Well, I think back then, because I started taking live calls at the end of
Hmm.
February. So I
Uh-huh.
think back then, in Australia, we still didn't think it was going to be what it was.
Yeah.
So we were asking, I think back then we were just asking if you'd been to China. And that was it.
Hmm.
Because at the time they were just concerned about Chinese tourists and people that had spent time in China. So it didn't really seem that bad. And having come from the airport where you do deal with diseases and stuff from overseas, it didn't stress me out too much
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I have dealt with flights that came with known cases of certain diseases and stuff, and we had to lock them up and have quarantine, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't too stressful for me in that aspect. It was more just how much are things going to change. And then when I went
Right.
into mentoring, when I was taking live calls, they changed again and again and again. And our procedures just changed like every week. Sometimes from day to day, they changed. This time we're asking this question, this time we're asking that question. It just kept changing. And I think I was lucky that I started then because I got to see what normal real life is like.
Yeah.
Because since we've been in lockdown, we've had less calls or different calls and less to what we will have when everyone's back out again.
Hmm.
And I think there's a few people that have started in the middle of this year, and I don't think that they've really seen what normal life is like because everyone's at home and everyone knows where they are. And, they're calling from their home address, so it's much easier to find them. I think we had a month in the middle. So in Melbourne, we went into lockdown in March,
Hmm.
and then we were locked down from March to June, the start of June. Then we had about 3 weeks. Oh, there goes my lights. We had about 3 weeks where we were allowed to go out again, but still with restrictions.
Hmm.
And then what happened was we had hotel quarantine, where if you came back from overseas, you were quarantined for 2 weeks in a hotel. And unfortunately, COVID escaped our hotel quarantine. So we had a second wave and we went back into lockdown at the end of June. So there was a month where we had people going out and getting drunk and, taking mushrooms in state forests and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to quickly step over here just so I can sorry, it's a sensor light. So if
Yeah,
no one
no
moves
problem.
for a while, it turns off. Yeah, so then we went back into lockdown and we have what's called a hard lockdown since August. where we were only allowed to go outside for an hour a day. Only one person was allowed to go to the supermarket from a household. You couldn't, like, everything was closed. Retail was closed. Everything that you wanted to buy had to be online or click and collect. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting period to be working here, because luckily I've been allowed to go out of the house and go to work, whereas everyone else is stuck at home. So that's nice.
Yeah, cabin fever.
We had to carry a permit to go to work and everything, because the police could pull you over and you'd get fined, like a really large fine. I think now it's like $5,000 fine if you're found breaching the rules.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, to say the least. And you're right. You know, you definitely do have a good outlook, perception, whichever, on life, the way it's been dealing with, especially because, as you were saying, you know, because of the training is what I'm getting at. You know, you get to learn all of that, and those that are starting have a different perception of what it's going to be like if things, you know, when it opens up again. And you know, it's a good example of, so when I asked you earlier about like sit-alongs and stuff, we would have people who would come in who were interested in dispatching or call taking, and they would sit with us for 3 to 4 hours. And there were times where nothing happened at all, which was the craziest thing. And they would say, "Oh, this is not bad. You know, you guys are just kind of chilling here. You got the TVs on, you know, just answering the phone whenever." Yeah. And I would look at them and say, "No, this is not real 911.
Yeah.
Like, this is not what happens." Like, there are some times where it is just so crazy in here that you can't hear yourself think, and you have to be able to listen. You need to be aware of the entire room. You're on the phone, you're typing, you're on the radio, you're listening to the person on the main radio who's sending everything out to the officers. And if they say something on the radio, you have to be able to yell over while still typing and stuff. And they're just staring at me. Think like, that can't be true, because that's not what we're doing now.
Yeah, but it can happen. I remember we worked the very first night shift that the lockdown was released for that 1 month. And so it was a Friday night, and pubs and clubs and stuff were allowed to open at like a smaller capacity. So it went from nothing during the night to multiple drunk people, they're unconscious, and whole party of people have taken drugs, and it was very different. And then when they announced the next lockdown, we worked the last night shift as well. So we got to see both ends. It was great.
That is awesome.
We were just the lucky team that got them both.
Yeah. your team's the magnet, as they call it. You know,
we're also working New Year's Eve, I believe. So
oh man, so that'll be interesting as well then.
Oh yeah, I think everyone will want to drink away 2020. So
oh, of course. Yeah. It's funny though, because, you know, I know a lot of people who would say, like, on social media or over text message or whatever, they would say, "Man, I cannot wait till 2019 is over and 2020 hits. It's going to be awesome." And I remember saying, "Yeah, it'll be cool. It'll be cool." And then all this stuff happens, and you're like, "What?"
Yeah, the whole world's changed. No one would have ever guessed that would happen.
Yeah, none at all. And you going through all of this and learning this this profession, that's just amazing to me.
Yeah,
because you're going through so much now. So I have to ask, when calls come in that are for you know, like law enforcement, and it turns to be a medical or something, do they end up transferring over to you and then you take over? So for like domestics, let's say there's domestics going on or something, and any medical piece, are you brought into that call, or is it given to you, or how does that part work?
So when you ring 000, you speak to a Telstra operator, and they ask you police, fire, ambulance, and you say whatever one, and then say it's a domestic dispute or something like that, and then you speak to a police call taker. That will automatically trigger an ambulance response anyway. So we already have that job in our system, and then if they want further first aid assistance, then they'll put them through to us.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we'll give them extra first aid assistance, or whatever is happening that they need.
Now, have you noticed a lot of you know, a lot more domestics actually happening and stuff to that nature, especially with COVID now. I think a couple of weeks ago for the Dare to Be Great conference, I'm pretty sure there was someone, I can't remember which talk it was, but they were talking about how domestic violence has gone up about 20% since all of this started.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably hyper aware because my research for my PhD is actually in domestic violence.
Oh,
So,
okay. So this is
yeah,
perfect.
so
Then. We didn't
yeah,
plan
so
this, I swear.
I know. I probably pay more attention than the others do, but yeah, because my research is looking at women's experience of reproductive abuse and violence and medical professionals, how they can better respond. So I pay probably more attention than a lot of other people do, but I can't say exactly. I know statistically the answer is yes, but because I'm not a police call taker, I don't get as much of those calls. I have had quite a few calls as an ambulance call taker where that's obvious that that's what's happened, but they obviously don't want police. That obviously happens quite often. But I know that in Australia, the answer is yes. It definitely has gone up a lot more. Because, yeah, like for understandable reasons, everyone's stuck at home. And if you're someone that's in a relationship like that, the only time you get to be safe is when your partner's out at work. But now they're being forced to work at home. So, yeah, unfortunately, that's what happened.
Yeah. And, you know, working remote always isn't that good because of situations like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just comes out. Now, you know, you've been there 10 months. You know, do you, what were some of your earlier calls that you remember? Like, were there any ones that right off the bat that you took that you were just, whoa, or anything to that matter?
My first ever call was just, I think, an elderly person had fallen. I remember being so like ready to take anything because that's what they prepare you for in training. They say your first call could be a stabbing, but you know, it was an elderly faller. So it was kind of nice that I didn't have to be so stressed about what I was doing. But then within my first hour and a half, I had that, but I also had someone who had found a family member not awake and not breathing, but couldn't move them. So they were very, very distressed, and yeah, trying to get them to actually try and do something was really difficult. And then I had my first CPR as well, which was for a heroin overdose. So that was all within an hour and a half of my very first day.
So I was going to ask you as well, you know, are there any calls in your 10 months that you've that have kind of stuck with you, and just that having that in your first hour and a half, I mean, that would definitely stick with me. But yeah, you get all of that right off the bat, and that's what was that first shift like for you then? Were you did you go home?
I really liked it because I'd been in the training room for so long, and then that first day I got to be, it just happened to be that my team was on that day. So I got to go and be mentored with my team. And it's really different being in the classroom because we don't have our team leaders and we don't have we don't have the paramedics there to ask for assistance and stuff. So it was really nice being out on the floor and being able to see how everything actually runs and being able to ask for them to come and help you. Like I had a difficult verification where someone had fallen off a motorbike or something, and it was on a rural road, and they had to drive 20 k's away to get reception to be able to call. So they couldn't tell us exactly where the person was because they'd driven 20 minutes. So I had to ask for help to find where they were, and all that kind of stuff doesn't happen when you're in the classroom. So it was really nice to see things in action, I guess you could say. But I think in my first rotation as well, I had a person on fire, which is also really rare.
Oh, wow.
Which I didn't know was rare until everyone just appeared next to me. Because I'd put in that code, and then I had a team leader and somebody else appear just to make sure that if I needed any support, I could ask them for help if there was something I wasn't familiar with. And they were like, yeah, two of them said, yeah, I've never had one of those before. So yeah, it was surprising.
Whoa. That is some first shift. I think you probably take the cake on you know, medical wise, like all of these, you know, calls that are coming in. See, and that's one of the things I have to commend you because you and your entire crew, my and this, for those who are listening, who are in the general public, this always sounds weird, but my favorite calls to take were domestics. Those were the ones that were very high priority. Just so many different things that I'm working on at that time. So those were the ones that I really enjoyed working with. Those and like police chases on the radios. Medicals,
Yeah.
I was good at medicals.
Yep.
But some of those would, just kind of freak me out, especially if they're like kids that are, choking or something. And you've got a parent who's just like slapping them. You can hear them slapping them on the back, and you're like, don't do that.
The first thing you say is, do not slap them on the back.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. And I remember saying that to a mom, and she starts swearing at me and saying, what else do you want me to do? You want my child to die? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want your child to get any more hurt than what's going on right now, because you're going to make it worse. And then, telling them how to do, the Heimlich and everything else. But to do medicals all day, how many hours did you say that you work a day?
12.
12.
Yeah.
I worked 12s as well. I worked 4:30 in the afternoon to 4:30 in the morning. I'm not sure if I could do that. So well done for you and your entire crew that you're able to do the medicals all the time. And I can see it in your face. I can hear it in your voice that you really genuinely love what you're doing. And that is awesome. That is very cool.
Yeah. I love that. I also really like the calls where you've got someone that's, I don't know, something's happened in public. And I really like the calls where everyone that's just walking around that doesn't know that person at all has called to offer them assistance, doesn't know them from an atom, and will actually do everything that you tell them to do and save them. And, I had a medical when someone, they crashed their car, but I think they'd had a medical episode before, like they hadn't actually had a car accident. And these people pulled him out of the car and did CPR on him, and they did not know this person. And I think it gives me a little bit of happiness to know that I feel like in the community, most people will actually go and help someone. So even sometimes when you think people are really annoying, that most people will actually go and help people. And I really like that about my job, that a lot of the people I speak to just genuinely want to help that person.
Yeah, that is amazing, because there are also those calls, on the law enforcement side. I remember specifically taking a call once on the other side of the spectrum here, where a gentleman called in. He was walking his dog. He was walking on the side of the road, and he called in and he goes, "Yeah, I'm in such and such area. You might want to send somebody to check on this person. They flipped their car." And I said, "Oh, is there any way safely that you can check and see if the person is in there and see if they're okay?"
Yeah.
"No, I've got other stuff I got to do," and then just like hung up.
Yeah,
And
I do get those as well.
and I thought, what the heck, man? Like, you can't just like peek over because I even asked them, can you yell out to the person to see if there's anybody there? And they wanted nothing to do with it. And that's their prerogative. They don't have to. But it just made me think, I would so help somebody. But those calls, especially like you're saying, that genuinely want to help, and all these people are calling, them pulling the person out of the car, they didn't even know them, they were complete strangers and wanted to do things to help. That right there is proof that humanity has a chance, that there are still good people out there. And
especially during COVID,
good.
People are happy to go and touch someone who's sick during COVID, which surprises me, but I'm glad that they do it.
Yeah, there's still people out there, and it's amazing. So as we go into the wrap up of this episode, I feel like we have another, like, we should do like a part 2 when you've had even a few months more, or whichever. I have really enjoyed talking to you. This has been good. This has been fun. What are, I guess, what advice might you have for someone who's starting out? You've got 10 months in. Obviously, you love what you're doing. Again, I can see it and hear it. But for those who are thinking about getting into this profession, whether it be 000, 999, 911, whichever, in this industry that we're in, what advice do you have for them? Some things, maybe that you have learned on the way early on, or whichever.
I think I would say passion. You have to be passionate about it, because I think one of the things I was really excited about actually when I started was everyone in the room, everyone in my training group was exactly like me. And I think when I'd worked at the airport, it wasn't like that. People just went to work for work. But the people that I work with here really like their job and they all really want to do it. And everyone wants to do things to the best of their ability. And I'm a perfectionist and I really like to do things really well. So it was really nice to be with lots of people that were like that. And we were all very competitive with each other as well. So I think you have to be prepared for that. Like, you have to be prepared that you're going to be critiqued all the time as well. And I knew that going into this job, but it's definitely a lot more critiquing than I even thought that I would have, for obvious reasons, because you've literally got life in your hands, so you have to make sure you're doing your job correctly. But we get audited all the time, and you get people listening to your calls all the time, telling you exactly what you have and haven't done right. And I think if you're someone that doesn't take criticism very well, that you probably need to think about that before applying, because you got to be able to take criticism and just run with it. Like, okay, this is what I've done and this is how I'm going to make it better. I think that's probably one of the first things that I would say as advice. Like, it's not personal. If they're telling you you've done something, you should do it this way. It's to help you and to help your caller.
Right.
You have to kind of not be thinking about yourself and be thinking about the fact that this is for someone else. Like, you need to do this better so you can help that person, not just think about your ego and, oh, I wish I wasn't getting told off all the time kind of thing. And I think also, you have to be prepared to see what real life is actually like. I think people sometimes probably come into it thinking that it's going to be like in the movies, or like watching 911 on TV, where there's tsunamis every week and, all these really weird things happen. And it's not like that. Like, you need to be prepared to speak to a poor elderly person who, their partner has passed away. And even though you might not be able to help that person because they've already gone, your job right then and there is to help that caller. So even if you can't help the person they've called for, you're there for that person. So in that moment in time, you need to have all of your focus and all of your empathy for that person. And you need to be able to let whatever else is going on in your life go. So even if you've had a really difficult call before that where the person might have abused you, you need to let that go for your next elderly lady that needs to speak to you. I think, that's the advice that I have to give for the newbies coming in.
Perfect. Very well said. That was awesome. Thank you so much for being on this episode with me. And I've learned a lot. And I think the listeners and myself could learn a lot more. So, open invitation. If you ever want to come on again, let's definitely do another episode. This has been really, really good. And I hope you have an excellent rest of your shift. And
thank you.
I will be right back here with you in just one moment. Thank you so much again, Molly, for being on. For those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, it is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This show will always be free, but if you are looking for any bonus episodes, the Singing Badly in My Car behind the scenes series, all different kinds of stuff, you can check us out right down here, and that's patreon.com/WTT podcast. There's also t-shirts, discounts to the store, swag, and other things as well. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and you can hear the show 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. And this video can also be seen on Facebook as well as YouTube. Have a good one, everyone.